On a regular basis, as a Christian leader, I wonder, how Christian is my organization? Is this what Jesus would do if he were me in this situation? Now, as I try to answer that in this episode and in this series, one of the things that we're going to start off with is to just think about how that question works. How is that meaningful? And then I'm going to give you one test to apply that's a useful thought experiment to help you think through how Christian is your organization. Hi, I'm Dr. J, and I help Christian leaders overcome the darkness of meaningless work with the flame of Christian wisdom. So when I think about what does it mean to be a Christian organization, it's sort of a strange question because organizations aren't Christians. The only person who can be a Christian is a person. In one sense, the question is a distraction. But what's the heart that people are trying to get at when we use those words? Even if an organization can't become a Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean that the organization doesn't have value for Christians. And just because it's Christian doesn't mean it doesn't have value for non-Christians. In fact, from a Christian perspective, if an organization was truly Christian, it would supply value probably for all people. That's because God cares about people and he cares about the planet. And that's why he put people in charge of the planet to do things like that. So it would only make sense that people and the planet would benefit from a Christian organization or an organization that was doing things Christianly and who had leaders that were operating it so. If we're to look at the test, because I think, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I get good at that? Am I doing it now? How would I know? Well, one test that I start to apply to myself is, I think, a pretty straightforward test of ethical relationships, because Jesus was very clear about how we were to treat one another. But I've encountered Christian business leaders who, for whatever reason, have said things about certain decisions. They would say, well, it's just business. But sometimes when I heard some of them say that, just business sounded like a way to ignore regular ethics. Because I don't think there's a such thing as special ethics that apply to business. Well, normally that would be wrong to beat up somebody like that. But since it's business, it's okay. I don't think that's the case. And so when I'm trying to understand where I am, I think about, am I treating people the way Jesus would? And that includes how I treat people in business. And so the golden rule still applies, that I should do unto others as they would do unto me. It becomes a little more tricky because as things get obfuscated, a lot of times business decisions are not just simply beneficial or not beneficial. So the test can break down to a certain degree because there are times where you have to make decisions where you just can't benefit each individual person. But you can do something that is more right or less right, or the kind of rightness that makes it appropriate for, that's the best call that you can possibly make. And some people won't understand it, and that's just part of leadership. Another variation of this is Christians who maybe rely not on ethics per se, because they've jettisoned the idea of ethics and have traded it for what is legal. So if it's legal, it must be okay. I think this is problematic. For example, it's legal to be drunk, but the Bible says don't be drunk. Now, most people don't drink on the job, but that's just a quick example of something that's obviously legal, but clearly not an acceptable biblical position to be in. And yet, if we try to manipulate things so that we make our organization do things that are legal but treat people badly, it's not the right way to go. Let's add one other test. So this ethical test is a very low standard, and it's a pretty obvious Christian test that a lot of Christians use. Golden rule. But what if we made it a little more complex and we thought about not just our direct relationships, but we considered the relationships that are part of our delegated responsibilities, then it becomes a little more interesting. Say, for example, I'm a Christian business owner, and I treat everybody very nicely. The company that I have, we make widgets that help people. It's very beneficial. And I have a good health plan. It just seems to be like I've done a lot of things structurally to provide for people, and I treat people well. But I put somebody in charge of my organization who's an absolute tyrant, and he treats people badly. And it doesn't matter that we give millions for missions and build hospitals and care for orphans, because in some ways, all that is made at the expense of the people who are being treated badly by the manager, who's the one who affects my employees' day-to-day lives. If I were to employ a tyrant, that would obviously be bad. But there's degrees of that where we can overlook things in the name of thinking about profits or thinking about giving or thinking about other relationships or how we personally deal with folks as opposed to the person that we've delegated. So the tyrant test is one where we cannot privatize or separate the responsibility that we have for the people with whom we've put in charge, that we need to understand what's happening and to address those wrongs. Now, these are a couple of things that I apply as I think about things like a policy. Is this policy that I've made, does it support people doing right, caring for one another, loving each other as they do themselves? If that's facilitated, and by the way, what love means is to will another's good. And if the practices within the company can help people and foster the good within one another or protect each other from doing things that are against that good, it could be a good policy. And then the people who implement those things need to be held accountable so that they treat people well as on top of that. If they don't, that's on me as a leader. I then think about how is it that I can manage and help my managers and know that my managers are treating people well. So I check in with direct employees, people that are under my managers. I ask them those kinds of questions, and I do my best to be observant and to not just let my voice be heard first, so that if somebody isn't being treated well, they have the courage to speak up and not just assume that I'll support the manager, that they'll know that I'll support what's right, whatever that is. What are some things that you do to help your employees feel cared for? What questions do you ask yourself when you create a policy, when you meet with people? Are the things that are happening in your organization supportive of not only another person's good and serving them, but also are you doing things to manage that supports their good and manage the managers? These kinds of things, they're tricky. I just wanted to give those couple of thoughts. I'm going to have another test in the next episode, and I hope you'll join me. I would love for you to leave a comment or suggestion about what you do to think about how Christian is your organization, or if you have a question that we could answer in a future episode, leave that below. And now, let's fan the flame of Christian wisdom. Until next time.